The Silent Observers. The Grand Hall of the Galactic Council was an architectural marvel, a vast chamber of soaring crystalline arches that caught starlight from a dozen nearby systems and refracted it through the room in cascading rainbows of color. At its center, a circular table fashioned from the rare neutronium of a collapsed star housed representatives from the 37 most powerful species in the known galaxy. Commander Thal of the Vizrak hegemony observed the proceedings with growing irritation. The Vizrak were apex predators, evolved from pack hunters with physical capabilities that made them the undisputed military power in 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. Their skin was a natural armor, their reflexes twice as fast as most species, and their strength legendary. Thal himself stood nearly 3 meters tall, his muscular frame covered in scales that shimmered like polished obsidian in the chamber's light. Yet despite his species dominance, Thal found himself increasingly distracted by the newest addition to the council, the humans. "They're doing it again," he muttered to his aide, Kurza. "Look at them." The human delegation, composed of 5 representatives from Earth's unified government, had positioned themselves in the furthest seats from the center of the chamber. They sat quietly, taking notes occasionally, but rarely speaking unless directly addressed. "7th meeting in a row," Kurza replied quietly. "Always the same position." The Galactic Council had admitted humanity just 1 standard year ago, after they had demonstrated faster-than-light technology sophisticated enough to join interstellar politics. The decision had been controversial. Humans were physically unimpressive, lacking the strength of the Vizrak, the telepathic abilities of the Noor, or the technological sophistication of the Zeta Collective. Yet their petition for membership had been granted, largely as a diplomatic courtesy to an emerging species. "It makes no tactical sense," Thal continued, his voice low enough that only Kurza's sensitive auditory membranes could detect it. "In Vizrak war councils, the strongest commanders take positions of prominence to demonstrate their power and right to be heard." "Perhaps they're simply intimidated," Kurza suggested. "They are among the smallest species here." Thal's upper lip curled, exposing a row of sharp teeth. "No, there's purpose in their positioning. I studied their historical military tactics. Humans are methodical." The Council's current discussion centered on resource allocation for a new hyperspace corridor through the Perseus Arm. The debate had grown heated between the Zeta Collective and the crystalline Folians, their representatives making grand gestures and raising their voices. Throughout it all, the humans remained silent observers, occasionally whispering among themselves. Supreme Ambassador Halsey, the council moderator, suddenly addressed the human delegation. "Earth's territories border this proposed corridor. What is your position?" Ambassador Julia Halsey, a middle-aged woman with silver-streaked hair and calm eyes, stood slowly. The chamber quieted. "The Earth Coalition has reviewed the proposed routes," she said, her voice measured but carrying clearly through the vast space. "We've prepared a detailed analysis of traffic projections, resource impacts, and security considerations." With a subtle gesture, she sent a data packet to the central display. What appeared was not the expected diplomatic platitudes, but a staggeringly comprehensive assessment, more thorough than anything the senior council members had prepared. "Based on our analysis," Halsey continued, "we recommend Route B7, with the modifications outlined on page 43. This preserves the Tholian cultural sites while still providing the efficiency the Zeta Collective requires." Silence followed her presentation. The solution was elegant, addressing concerns many council members hadn't even vocalized yet. Thal's eyes narrowed. She just resolved a dispute that's been ongoing for 3 cycles. In minutes, when the session adjourned, Thal approached the High Command terminal to submit an official request. He needed to understand these humans better. Their physical weakness combined with their analytical strength was a contradiction that troubled his military mind. 2 cycles later, Thal received his assignment. He would captain the diplomatic vessel Indomitable on a joint mission with human representatives to explore an anomaly at the edge of charted space. It was the perfect opportunity to observe humans in closer quarters. The Indomitable was the pride of the Vizrak fleet, a battle cruiser repurposed for diplomatic missions, but still bristling with enough weaponry to annihilate a small moon. Its crew was entirely Vizrak, with the exception of the 3 human scientists and 1 diplomat who had just come aboard. Commander Thal, Ambassador Chen Wei greeted him with the traditional Vizrak salute, executed perfectly despite the physiological differences between their species. "Thank you for accommodating us on this mission." Thal returned the gesture stiffly. "Ambassador, the Vizrak hegemony values this opportunity for cooperation." The human was half Thal's size, with no visible defenses or natural weapons. Yet there was something in Chen's calm demeanor that made Thal instinctively wary. "Your scientists may use Research Deck 3, Thal continued. "It has been equipped to human environmental standards." "Actually," Chen said with a small smile, "if it's acceptable, we would prefer to set up in Observation Bay 6. Thal's facial ridges furrowed. "Bay 6, that's at the aft of the ship. The research decks have superior equipment and are closer to the command center." "We have our own equipment," Chen explained, "and Observation Bay 6 offers an optimal vantage point for the type of spatial anomaly we're investigating." There it was again, the human preference for positions at the periphery rather than the center. Thal agreed, his curiosity about their behavior growing stronger. Over the next few days, Thal found excuses to observe the humans at work. Their setup in Observation Bay 6 was methodical, with equipment arranged in concentric circles around a central holographic display. The 3 scientists, Dr. Amara Okafor, Dr. Sanjay Patel, and Dr. Elena Rodriguez, worked in a coordinated rhythm that reminded Thal of Vizrak hunting units. "They're recording everything," Kurza reported after reviewing the ship's internal sensors. "Not just the anomaly data. They're monitoring our crew rotations, communication patterns, even power distribution across ship systems." "For what purpose?" Thal demanded. "Unknown, Commander, but they're processing the information collectively. They share data constantly." Thal decided to confront the matter directly. He approached Bay 6 during what humans called night shift, expecting to find them resting. Instead, all 4 were awake, engaged in what appeared to be an informal discussion. "Commander," Ambassador Chen acknowledged him immediately. "Would you care to join us?" Thal stepped into the bay, his large frame making the space seem suddenly smaller. "Your species requires regular sleep cycles, yet you are all awake." Dr. Okafor smiled. "We rotate our deep sleep periods. Someone is always observing." "Observing what exactly?" Thal asked bluntly. "The anomaly is still 12 hours from intercept range." The humans exchanged glances, a subtle communication that Thal couldn't decipher. "Commander," Dr. Rodriguez said carefully, "have you ever heard the human phrase, 'the devil is in the details'?" Thal's translator implant struggled with the idiom before providing context. "You believe important information is hidden in small details." "Precisely," Chen confirmed. "Humans have evolved as pattern recognition specialists. We see connections in seemingly unrelated data points. It's why we prefer." The ship's alert system suddenly blared, cutting off Chen's explanation. Thal's communication implant activated. "Commander," his first officer's voice was urgent, "the anomaly has changed. It's expanding rapidly toward our position." Thal moved toward the exit. "Battle stations, prepare for emergency FTL jump." "Wait," Dr. Patel called out, his fingers flying across his data terminal. "Commander, an FTL jump could be catastrophic. The anomaly is emitting tachyon particles that will interact with your drive system." Thal hesitated at the doorway. "Explain." Dr. Okafor stepped forward, projecting the simulation onto the bay's main screen. "The anomaly isn't natural. It's artificial, a remnant of ancient technology. Your ship's particular FTL frequency will resonate with the tachyon field, creating a cascade reaction." "How could you know our ship's FTL frequency?" Fall demanded. That's classified information. We didn't need to know it specifically, Dr. Rodriguez interjected. We've been monitoring your power distribution patterns. The harmonic resonance of your systems has a signature that would interact catastrophically with the tachyon field. Fall stared at them, suddenly understanding. This is why you positioned yourselves here. You've been analyzing my ship since you came aboard. Ambassador Chen nodded calmly. Not out of distrust, Commander. It's simply what humans do. We observe, we analyze, we prepare for contingencies. The alert sirens continued to wail as Thal made his decision. What do you suggest instead of an FTL jump? Thal hesitated only momentarily before relaying the instructions to the bridge. The Indomitable shuddered as the thrusters fired in the precise pattern the humans had calculated. On the view screen, the swirling vortex of the anomaly brushed past them, missing the ship by mere kilometers. When the danger had passed, Thal stood in Observation Bay 6, regarding the humans with new appreciation. You saved my ship, he acknowledged. But I must ask, why do your kind always position yourselves at the back of any gathering? In council meetings on my ship, it seems contrary to a species seeking influence. Ambassador Chen smiled. Commander, in human military history, the most effective commanders rarely stood at the front of the battle. They positioned themselves where they could see the entire field. The highest ground, Dr. Okafor added, is often the position with the best view. And the person who speaks the least, Ambassador Chen concluded, often observes the most. Thal felt a new respect forming for these physically unimposing beings. The humans had not been cowering at the edges of the council chamber. They had been strategically positioning themselves to observe everything and everyone. As the Indomitable continued its mission, Thal began to understand that humanity's true strength lay not in physical power, but in their relentless analysis of everything around them. They were not merely participants in galactic politics. They were studying it, mapping its currents and eddies like scientists charting an unexplored phenomenon. And for the first time in his distinguished military career, Commander Thal of the mighty Vizrek Gemini felt a sensation he rarely experienced: caution. The return journey to Galactic Central was tense. Commander Thal had filed a detailed report about the anomaly encounter, but he deliberately omitted certain details about the humans' involvement. Something fundamental had shifted in his understanding of the species, and he wasn't ready to share those insights with the Vizrek High Command, at least not yet. You're quiet, Commander, Ambassador Chen remarked as they shared a meal in the officers' dining hall. It was a courtesy Thal had not extended to foreign dignitaries before, but something about these humans had earned his respect. I'm reconsidering my assessment of humanity's place in the Galactic Council, Thal admitted, his clawed hand wrapped around a goblet of fermented Vizrek nectar. Chen nodded thoughtfully. Many species underestimate us at first. It's not entirely disadvantageous. You cultivate this perception, Thal said. It wasn't a question. Commander, Chen replied with a small smile. Humanity spent millennia as prey before we became predators. Even after we clawed our way to the top of Earth's food chain, we remained physically weaker than many threats. We survived through observation and adaptation. Dr. Okafor, who had joined them for the meal, added, in human history, the most successful military tacticians were those who understood that strength alone doesn't win conflicts. Positioning, timing, and information often matter more. Thal's ridge scales flared slightly, a sign of interest among Vizrek. Your council representatives employ these same tactics then, positioning themselves to observe rather than dominate. There's power in being underestimated, Chen said simply, and wisdom in watching before acting. Before Thal could respond, his communication implant chirped with an urgent priority signal. He excused himself and stepped into the corridor. Commander, the voice of Galactic Council Security Chief Travko was tense. All diplomatic vessels are being recalled to Central immediately. The Council has called an emergency session. Understood. What's the nature of the emergency? Classified until you arrive. Maximum speed, Commander. The transmission ended abruptly. Thal returned to the dining hall, his posture rigid. "We're being recalled to Galactic Central," he announced. "Emergency council session." Ambassador Chen's expression remained calm, but Thal noticed a subtle shift in his posture, a straightening of the spine, a slight narrowing of the eyes. The human was analyzing, calculating. "I'll inform my colleagues," Chen said, rising from the table. "We'll be ready for whatever comes." The Grand Hall of the Galactic Council was chaos when they arrived. Species that normally maintained rigid diplomatic protocols were arguing openly, their translators struggling to keep pace with the overlapping voices. The central projection showed a massive fleet of unknown vessels approaching galactic central space. "Unknown configuration," Kurza murmured, studying the projection. "Weapons signatures beyond our classification system." Thal nodded grimly. The Council has never faced a unified external threat before. They're unprepared. As they took their places, Thal found himself watching the human delegation. As always, they had positioned themselves at the rear of the chamber. Ambassador Halsey and her team, including Chen, who had just arrived with Thal, were calmly studying the tactical displays while the other species argued. Silence. The Council moderator's amplified voice finally cut through the din. "We have confirmed that these vessels do not match any known species in our databases. They have not responded to standard greeting protocols. Their trajectory and formation suggest hostile intent." The Zeta Collective Representative, a cluster of interconnected semi-organic nodes, pulsed with agitation. "Our predictive models indicate a 93.7% probability of military superiority over our combined defensive capabilities." Panic rippled through the chamber. The Vizrek High Commander, Thal's superior, stood to address the Council. "The Vizrek hegemony is prepared to lead a defensive action," he declared. "We will deploy our battle fleet to meet this threat before it reaches Galactic Central." Various species voiced their agreement, pledging ships and resources. Throughout the commotion, Thal noticed the humans conferring quietly among themselves. Ambassador Halsey was receiving data on her personal device, her expression thoughtful. Finally, she stood and activated her speaker channel. The room gradually quieted. "Esteemed colleagues," Halsey began, her voice steady, "before we commit to a potentially catastrophic military engagement, I believe we should consider all available information." The Vizrek High Commander's scales darkened with irritation. "Ambassador, with respect, this is no time for human caution. We must act decisively." "On the contrary, High Commander," Halsey replied, "this is precisely the time for careful analysis. My team has been processing the sensor data from the approaching fleet, and we've identified several anomalies." She transferred her data to the central projection. The image of the approaching fleet was now overlaid with detailed energy readings and trajectory analyses. "First," she continued, "the fleet maintains perfect formation despite traveling through a region with significant gravitational distortion. Second, the energy signatures suggest automated systems rather than crewed vessels. Third, and most importantly, the communication attempts have been using an outdated protocol, one that was standard 3,000 years ago." The council chamber grew silent as the implications sank in. "These aren't invaders," Dr. Okafor said, stepping forward to join Halsey. "They're automated defensive systems from an ancient civilization, likely the same one that created the spatial anomaly we just investigated." The Tholian representative's crystalline form vibrated with skepticism. "What evidence supports this theory?" Instead of answering directly, Halsey turned to Chen. "Ambassador, please share what you discovered on the Indomitable." Chen nodded and transmitted data to the central display. The spatial anomaly we examined contained encoded mathematical sequences, not random, but a specific pattern that matches the formation of these approaching vessels. Thal stood, drawing the council's attention. "I can confirm this. My ship's records validate Ambassador Chen's findings." "What are you suggesting, Ambassador Halsey?" the council moderator asked. "I believe these are automated security systems," Halsey explained. They're not attacking. They're responding to a specific trigger, likely our recent expansion into their former territory. And what action do you propose? The Vizrak High Commander demanded. Halsey's response was measured. These systems are following programmed protocols from a civilization that no longer exists. They're looking for a specific authentication signal. Dr. Rodriguez has analyzed the mathematical pattern and believes she can replicate it. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stepped forward, her dark eyes intense with focus. The pattern is complex, but not beyond our capabilities to reproduce. If we broadcast it from Galactic Central, the automated systems should recognize it as authoritative and stand down. Skepticism filled the chamber. The Noor representative, a being of swirling energy contained within a specialized environment suit, spoke next. If you are wrong, Ambassador, you will have brought this threat directly to our seat of government. True, Halsey acknowledged. But if we're right, we avoid a costly and potentially unwinnable conflict. The council debated furiously for nearly an hour. Throughout the discussion, Fall observed the humans carefully. They remained calm, offering data when requested but never pushing their position aggressively. They were letting the council come to its own decision, while subtly guiding the conversation through selectively shared information. Finally, the council voted. By a narrow margin, they agreed to attempt the human solution. Dr. Rodriguez worked with the council's technical team to configure the massive communication array. The chamber fell silent as the signal was transmitted. On the tactical display, the approaching fleet continued its advance. It's not working, the Vizrak High Commander growled, turning to Halsey. Your theory was wrong. Wait, Dr. Patil urged, his eyes fixed on the display. The signal needs time to propagate. For several agonizing minutes, nothing changed. Then, suddenly, the fleet's formation shifted. The vessels began to realign, moving from attack formation into a ceremonial escort pattern. They're escorting us, the council moderator breathed in disbelief. Not quite, Halsey explained. They're acknowledging our authority to be here. The signal we sent essentially told them we're the legitimate successors to their creator's territory. Relief flooded the chamber. The crisis had been averted without a single shot fired. As the emergency session concluded, Thal found himself approaching the human delegation. He had witnessed something profound, a victory achieved not through superior firepower, but through superior understanding. Ambassador Halsey, he said formally, the Vizrak hegemony acknowledges your delegation's contribution today. Halsey nodded graciously. Thank you, Commander. We were fortunate to have the right information at the right time. It wasn't fortune, Thal countered. It was preparation. Your positioning in this chamber, your constant observation. You were gathering data long before it was needed. For the first time, Halsey's diplomatic mask slipped slightly, revealing a hint of surprise. You understand our approach. I'm beginning to, Thal admitted. In Vizrak culture, power is demonstrated through central positioning and dominant behavior. We believe controlling the center means controlling the outcome. And in human history, Chen added, joining them, we learned that controlling the center often makes you the target. Halsey smiled. We prefer to see the whole board, Commander. It's difficult to do that from the center of the action. Thal considered this. Your species is physically weaker than many in the Council, yet you consistently demonstrate strategic superiority. Physical strength is just one form of power, Halsey said. Pattern recognition, predictive analysis, contextual understanding. These are equally valuable tools. Is this why humans always sit at the back? Thal asked directly. The human delegates exchanged glances, and then Halsey nodded. Partly. The best position for observation is rarely the most visible one. We position ourselves where we can see everyone and everything. And where you can whisper among yourselves without being overheard, Thal added with newfound respect. That too, Chen acknowledged with a slight smile. As they parted ways, Thal found himself looking at the council chamber with new eyes. The Vizrak had always viewed the central positions as the seats of power, where the strongest and most dominant species belonged. But the humans had demonstrated that true power came not from being seen, but from seeing, not from being heard, but from listening. In the months that followed, subtle changes began to appear in the Galactic Council's dynamics. The Vizric delegates, under Thal's influence, became more observant and less reactive. Other species began to recognize the value of positioning for information rather than dominance. And the humans, they continued to sit at the back of every meeting, quietly observing, analyzing, and understanding. But they were no longer underestimated. During one particularly contentious session, Thal found himself looking back at the human delegation. Ambassador Halsey caught his eye and offered a small, knowing nod. In that moment, a mutual understanding passed between them, a recognition that sometimes the greatest power comes from the quietest corner of the room. The most dangerous species in the galaxy, Thal had realized, wasn't the one with the sharpest claws or the strongest muscles. It was the one watching silently from the back, seeing patterns no one else could see, and understanding dynamics no one else had mapped. It was the species that knew when to speak and when to listen. It was humanity. The Gathering Storm. 6 standard months after the Ancient Fleet incident, the Galactic Council had undergone subtle but significant changes. Species that had previously vied aggressively for central positions now distributed themselves more strategically throughout the chamber. Discussions had become more measured, less performative. And perhaps most tellingly, many delegations had begun placing their most analytical members at the periphery of meetings, a tacit acknowledgement of the human approach. Commander Thal, now promoted to Vizric Senior Envoy, found himself increasingly consulted on matters of galactic security. His experience with the humans aboard the Indomitable had transformed him from a traditional warrior diplomat into something his species had rarely produced, a strategic observer. Today's council session was focused on trade route security in the Orion Spur, but Thal's attention was divided. The human delegation was missing 2 of its regular members, including Ambassador Halsey. Unusual, he murmured to Kurza, who had been promoted alongside him. The humans never alter their delegation composition without purpose. Perhaps they're ill, Kurza suggested. Their biology is fragile compared to ours. No, Thal replied. There's something else at play. When the session adjourned, Thal approached Ambassador Chen, who had been leading the human delegation in Halsey's absence. Ambassador, Thal greeted him formally. I noticed some changes in your delegation today. Chen's expression remained diplomatic, but Thal had spent enough time studying human facial microexpressions to detect the subtle tension around his eyes. Ambassador Halsey was called away on urgent business, Chen explained. Nothing that should concern the council at this time. Thal noted the careful phrasing. At this time, he repeated. But perhaps it should concern me, as head of the newly formed Security Coordination Committee. For a moment, Chen seemed to weigh his options. Then he gave a slight nod. Walk with me, Envoy Thal. I believe the Contemplation Gardens offer suitable privacy. The Contemplation Gardens were an artificial habitat at the heart of the Galactic Central Station, designed to provide comfortable environments for a variety of species. Chen led Thal to a secluded area that mimicked an earth forest, with tall trees filtering the artificial sunlight. What I'm about to share hasn't been confirmed enough to bring before the council, Chen began once they were alone. But given our previous cooperation, Ambassador Halsey authorized me to brief you privately. Thal felt his dorsal scales tighten, a Vizric reaction to anticipated danger. I'm listening. 6 of our outer colony worlds have reported unusual communication disruptions in the past month, Chen explained. Initially, we attributed it to solar flare activity or equipment malfunctions, but our analysis revealed a pattern. The disruptions are deliberate, Thal concluded. Chen nodded. And precise. They target specific communication bands, those used for automated defense coordination. Someone is testing your defenses, Thal said, his military mind immediately grasping the implications. Probing for weaknesses. We believe so, Chen confirmed. Ambassador Halsey is personally investigating our farthest affected colony. Dr. Okafor is analyzing the disruption signatures to identify their source. Fall's ridge scales flared slightly. Why keep this from the council? Because we don't know who's responsible, Chen said simply. And in a council with 37 species, accusations without proof can be diplomatically complicated. Fall understood immediately. Any species could be responsible, even one represented on the council itself. Bringing unsubstantiated concerns would create chaos and paranoia. The humans continue to observe and analyze, Fall noted with grudging respect, even when under potential threat. It's what we do, Chen replied. But now I have a question for you, Envoy Thal. Has the Vizrak hegemony experienced any similar disruptions? The question caught Fall by surprise. Not to my knowledge. But our communication protocols are different from yours. Perhaps you should check, Chen suggested. Specifically, your long-range sensor networks in the Perseus Quadrant. Now Fall was genuinely alarmed. The Perseus Quadrant housed the Vizrak's most sensitive deep space monitoring stations, the early warning system for their core worlds. That Chen even knew of their existence was concerning. You've been watching us as well, Fall observed, not entirely surprised. We watch everything, Chen said unapologetically, and we've detected subtle fluctuations in data transmission from that region. Nothing your systems would flag automatically, but consistent with the patterns we've seen near our colonies. Fall straightened to his full height, towering over the human. If what you're suggesting is true, then someone is systematically testing the defenses of multiple council species, Chen finished, starting with those at the edges of council space. A prelude to invasion, Fall growled. Possibly, Chen conceded, or something else entirely. That's why we need more information before bringing this to the council. Fall's martial instincts urged immediate action, but his newly developed strategic sense recognized the wisdom in the human approach. What do you propose? A joint investigation, Chen replied. Unofficial, discreet. Your military expertise combined with our analytical capabilities. And if we find evidence of hostile intent. Chen's expression hardened slightly. Then we bring it to the council together, with proof. Fall considered the proposal. Working directly with humans outside official channels went against Vizrak protocol, yet he couldn't deny their effectiveness. I will need to consult with my high command, he finally said. Chen shook his head. With respect, Envoy, if there is an infiltration of communication systems, your high command communications could be compromised. You expect me to act without authorization? Fall asked incredulously. I expect you to use your judgment, Chen replied calmly. As senior envoy, you have significant operational discretion. Fall fell silent, weighing his options. The human was asking him to trust them based on partial information, to potentially risk his position and reputation on their analysis. You know what's interesting about humans, Envoy Thal? Chen said, breaking the silence. Throughout our evolutionary history, we were rarely the strongest species in our environment. But we became the dominant species on our planet because we recognized patterns faster than our competitors, and we acted on that information while others hesitated. The implied message was clear. Hesitation could be costly. I will assign a small technical team to investigate our Perseus stations, Fall decided. Discreetly. If we find evidence supporting your theory, then we can discuss next steps. Chen nodded, satisfied. That's all we ask. In the meantime, Dr. Rodriguez will share our encryption algorithms with your team. They should help identify the subtle intrusion signatures. As they walked back toward the council chambers, Fall found himself reassessing the humans yet again. Their positioning at the back of rooms wasn't merely for observation. It was part of a comprehensive strategic approach to galactic politics. They gathered information constantly, analyzed it collectively, and acted decisively when necessary. One more thing, Envoy, Chen said as they reached the main corridor. Ambassador Halsey asked me to tell you something. Yes? In human military history, there's a concept called the silent knife. The idea that the most dangerous opponent isn't the one shouting threats, but the one quietly positioning for advantage. Fall absorbed this. You believe we're facing such an opponent now? I believe, Chen said carefully, that someone is being very methodical. And in our experience, methodical adversaries are the most dangerous kind. 3 days later, Fall stood in the secure communications center of his embassy, reviewing the findings from his technical team. The evidence was undeniable. Subtle but systematic probing of the Vizric sensor network, disguised as routine data fluctuations. Without the human encryption analysis, they would never have detected it. Send for Ambassador Chen, he instructed Kurza. Secure channel, encrypted with the new protocols. When Chen arrived an hour later, Fall presented the findings without preamble. Your assessment was correct. Our systems have been compromised in the same manner as yours. Chen reviewed the data, his expression grim. The pattern matches perfectly. Whoever is doing this has been testing both our species' defenses simultaneously. Have you identified the source? Fall asked. Not definitively, Chen admitted, but we've narrowed it down. The intrusion signals appear to originate from somewhere in the Vela sector. Fall's ridge scales flattened against his skull, a sign of intense concentration among Vizrak. The Vela sector is undeveloped. No council species claims territory there. Precisely, Chen agreed, which makes it the perfect hiding place for someone who doesn't want to be found. Or for someone preparing an attack, Fall added darkly. They were interrupted by an urgent communication alert. It was Dr. Okafor, her face tense. Ambassador Chen, we've lost contact with Ambassador Halsey's expedition. Their ship missed 2 scheduled check-ins. Chen's posture stiffened. Last known position. Near the boundary of the Vela sector, Dr. Okafor reported. They were investigating an unusual radiation signature. Fall and Chen exchanged significant looks. This cannot be coincidence, Fall said. No, Chen agreed grimly. I believe Ambassador Halsey may have found what we're looking for, and whoever is responsible found her first. Fall made a decision. My ship, the Indomitable, can be ready within 6 hours. We will find your ambassador. A Vizrek warship entering unexplored space could be seen as an act of aggression, Chen cautioned. Then we won't go as a warship, Fall countered. We'll go as a search and rescue mission, with a joint Vizrek human crew. Chen considered this. Cooperative action rather than unilateral. The Council would have difficulty objecting to that. And Fall added, his mandibles forming what passed for a smile among his species, it gives us legitimate reason to investigate the Vela sector directly. Chen nodded slowly. Authorized search patterns would allow us to map significant portions of the region. While searching for your missing ambassador, Fall finished. A mission no one could reasonably oppose. For the first time in their acquaintance, Fall saw genuine appreciation in Chen's eyes. You're learning to think like a human, Envoy Thal. No, Thal corrected him. I'm learning to observe before acting. There's a difference. The Indomitable's departure was expedited through Council bureaucracy with unprecedented speed, a testament to the growing respect the human delegation had earned. Within 12 hours, they were underway with a crew complement of 30 Vizrek officers and 10 human specialists. Fall had converted the ship's strategic command center into a joint operations room, where human and Vizrek analysts worked side by side. Dr. Rodriguez and Dr. Patel had integrated their scanning equipment with the Vizrek systems, creating detection capabilities neither species possessed independently. Approaching Ambassador Halsey's last known coordinates, Kurza announced from the navigation station, all sensors at maximum sensitivity, Fall ordered. I want every anomaly flagged and analyzed. The view screen showed empty space, stars against the void, with no visible sign of a ship or distress beacon. Curious, Dr. Rodriguez murmured, studying her console. There's no debris, no radiation signature consistent with a ship in distress. Could they have continued on a different vector? Fall asked. Possible, Chen acknowledged. But Halsey would have sent an encrypted burst transmission if they changed course deliberately. Dr. Patel suddenly straightened at his station. I'm detecting unusual gravimetric readings. It's as if space-time itself is slightly distorted in this region. Natural phenomenon? Fall inquired. Unlikely, Dr. Rodriguez replied, joining Patel at his console. The pattern is too regular, too contained. This looks manufactured. Fall moved to their station, towering over the human scientists. Explain. It's like a ripple in space, Dr. Patel said, pointing to his readings, but fixed in position, as if something is constantly disturbing the fabric of space-time at this exact point. A cloaking technology, Chen suggested. Not like any we've encountered, Dr. Rodriguez replied. But theoretically, yes, it could be a side effect of an advanced cloaking system. Fall considered this information. Can we penetrate it? Not directly, Dr. Patel said, but we might be able to map its boundaries by measuring the gravimetric distortions. Do it, Fall ordered. For the next hour, the Indomitable performed a careful search pattern around the anomalous region. The human scientists coordinated with Visric sensor operators, gradually building a three-dimensional map of the distortion. It's huge, Dr. Rodriguez finally announced. At least 20 kilometers in diameter. Too large for a ship, Fall observed. Unless it's a ship unlike any we've encountered before, Chen said quietly. The implications hung in the air. A vessel of that size would dwarf even the largest Council dreadnoughts. We need to find a way to see what's inside that distortion, Fall decided. Dr. Patel had been working silently at his station. I think I might have something. The distortion has a fluctuation pattern, subtle, but regular. If we can time a specialized sensor pulse to match that pattern, we might get a brief glimpse inside. Dr. Rodriguez finished, already modifying the sensor array. The pulse will reveal our presence, Fall warned. We're already revealed, Chen countered. If there's something that size using this level of technology, it already knows we're here. It's just choosing not to engage. Fall nodded grimly. Proceed with the sensor pulse. The science team worked quickly, synchronizing the Indomitable sensors with the fluctuation pattern of the spatial distortion. When everything was ready, Dr. Rodriguez looked to Fall for final authorization. Execute, he commanded. The view screen flickered as the sensor pulse was emitted. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the empty space before them seemed to ripple, like heat waves over desert sand. The distortion wavered, and for just a fraction of a second, they caught a glimpse of what lay hidden. Record everything, Fall ordered, though the science team was already doing exactly that. The image lasted less than 2 seconds before the distortion stabilized again. But it was enough. The bridge crew stared at the frozen frame captured by their sensors. It showed an enormous structure, not a ship, but a station of some kind. Its architecture was like nothing in Council records, with sweeping curved surfaces that seemed to flow into one another. And surrounding it were dozens of smaller vessels, arranged in precise formation. That's a fleet staging area, Kurza whispered. And that's Ambassador Halsey's ship, Chen added, pointing to a small vessel docked at one of the station's extending arms. They're alive. But for how long? Fall wondered aloud. And more importantly, who are they? And what are they planning? The answer came sooner than anyone expected. The Indomitable's communication system suddenly activated, displaying an incoming transmission from within the cloaked region. They're hailing us, the communications officer reported, surprise evident in her voice. Fall exchanged glances with Chen. Put it through. The view screen changed to show a being unlike any Council species. Its form was vaguely humanoid, but with proportions that seemed wrong somehow. Limbs too long, head too angular. Its skin had a metallic sheen that caught the light oddly. Your curiosity has been noted, the being said in flawless galactic standard, as has your cooperation across species. Interesting. Perhaps the assessment requires adjustment. I am Senior Envoy Thal of the Vizrek Hegemony. Thal responded formally. You are holding an ambassador of Earth. We demand her immediate release. The being's head tilted at an unsettling angle. Demands are irrelevant. The human is unharmed. She is being evaluated. Evaluated for what purpose? Chen asked, stepping forward. The being seemed to focus on Chen with new interest. You are human as well. Curious that you would align with the Vizrek. Our observations suggested your species would be natural adversaries. That's why you've been testing our defenses, Thal realized. You've been assessing our relationships and vulnerabilities. Assessment precedes action, the being confirmed. The Galactic Council has expanded into regions once belonging to the predecessors. We are the inheritors. We must determine if you are threats or potential assets. The ancient fleet, Chen said suddenly. They were your technology. A test, the being acknowledged. One that revealed unexpected cooperation between species. This requires further study. Thal felt a chill run down his spine, despite his species' advanced temperature regulation. Study for what purpose? He demanded. The being's expression didn't change. Indeed, it seemed incapable of facial movement, but something in its posture shifted subtly. To determine if your coalition will be permitted to continue, it stated as if discussing something trivial. The human ambassador has provided fascinating insights into your political structures. Most unexpected was her positioning theory, that power flows from observation rather than dominance. Chen stepped forward again. Ambassador Halsey shared this with you willingly. She believes cooperation is possible between our kinds, the being replied. We remain unconvinced, but intrigued enough to postpone judgment. Postpone judgment, Thal repeated, his warrior instincts flaring. The inheritors do not share resources or territory unless necessity dictates, the being explained. Your council species have expanded into what was once ours. Normally, this would require correction. The implication was clear. Correction meant elimination. However, the being continued, the human ambassador has proposed an alternative, a formal meeting between inheritor representatives and your council, an exchange of knowledge and territorial boundaries. Diplomacy instead of conflict, Chen observed. A concept we find novel, the being admitted. Return to your council. Inform them that the inheritors will send representatives in 3 standard cycles. The human ambassador will accompany us as liaison. And if we refuse? Thal asked, though he already suspected the answer. The being's metallic features remained impassive. Refusal would conclude our assessment phase. The correction phase would begin immediately. With that, the transmission ended. The view screen returned to showing the apparently empty space, though they now knew what lurked behind the distortion. Chen broke the tense silence. We need to return to the council immediately. Thal nodded, already calculating their fastest route back to Galactic Central. As he gave the orders to his crew, he found himself reflecting on how drastically the situation had changed. What had begun as an investigation into communication disruptions had revealed an entirely new power, one that had been watching, assessing, judging from the shadows, just as the humans did from the back of the council chamber. Ambassador Chen, Thal said quietly as the ship prepared for its jump to FTL. I begin to understand why your species values observation so highly. The inheritors have been watching us all along, yet we never knew they existed. Until now, Chen replied grimly. And now the entire Galactic Council's future depends on how well we can convince them that cooperation is preferable to correction. A diplomatic challenge unlike any the Council has faced, Thal acknowledged. Chen's expression was solemn but determined. Then it's fortunate that humans excel at understanding those who observe from the shadows. After all, it's what we do best. As the Indomitable leaped into faster-than-light travel, Thal found himself grateful for the humans' peculiar evolutionary path, their development as observers rather than dominators. In the coming confrontation with the inheritors, the galaxy's future might depend not on the species that roared the loudest, but on the one that had learned to watch from the back of the room.